Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, thank you very much for the opportunity to testify here today. Also, I'd like to express my appreciation for the patience of the members on the committee and Senator Coons while obtaining a copy of my written testimony. I'd like to start with a visual aid. This is the Homeland Security Advisory Council Countering Violent Extremism Subcommittee Interim Report for 2016. My colleague referred to it earlier as suggesting that we should refrain from using words like Ummah or Jihad or Sharia. I would like to also show you another visual aid, and this is what is called the Words Matter memo that was published in January of 2008. And my story today is going to be what happened between these two documents, these two touchstone documents, 2008 and 2016, because it was during that period of time that what we know now as the Countering Violent Extremism policy came to be. And one of the expressions of that policy is what we heard all about in the media in a few days after the Orlando shootings, that Attorney General Lynch was going to release partial transcript of Orlando 911 calls with all references to Islamic terrorism removed. That is a condensation of what was actually happening behind the scenes with subject matter experts like myself who were sworn officers to protect our country from threat, both foreign and domestic. Between these two dates, 2008 and 2016, came what I call the first great purge, when I was ordered by the Department of Homeland Security headquarters to modify, a euphemism, removing all linking information out of approximately 820 text subject records in our law enforcement system that almost exclusively had to do with Muslim Brotherhood network here in the United States. I was told to remove all unauthorized references to terrorism, that I was no longer allowed to do what are called memorandums of information received, what we call MOIRs, no more text records, no more research, and no more special treatment from the agency. But during that time, hundreds of law enforcement actions had been taken in the 3-year period when those 820 plus records were still in the law enforcement system. At exactly the same time, a controversial inaugural meeting took place on January 27th and 28th, 2010, between American Muslim leaders and the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Janet Napolitano, which was hosted by the Department of Homeland Security Civil Rights and Civil Liberties. It was controversial because several of the individuals attended the invitation-only conference in D.C. were known affiliates of at least two of the same Muslim Brotherhood front groups that had just been named as unindicted co-conspirators in the largest terrorism trial in the history of the United States, the Holy Land Foundation trial. Also that spring, at least 6 individuals with known affiliations to the Muslim Brotherhood front groups were appointed to the Countering Violent Extremism CVE Working Group, which was convened under the authority of the Homeland Security Advisory Council. I would like to show you now the logo of the Muslim Brotherhood, the moderate organization that this administration chose to ally itself with. Across the middle it says Al-Ikhwan al-Muslimin, which means the brothers of the Muslim, or the Muslim Brotherhood. And at the bottom, taken from Quran 860, is the word Wa'ayuda, which means prepare yourselves to terrify your adversaries with steeds of war or weapons of war. That is the motto of the Muslim Brotherhood. By the spring of 2010, we had come to the point that a CBP officer was literally linking information, meaning the dots, on Muslim Brotherhood-linked individuals from text, while the administration was bringing the very same individuals into positions of influence to help create and implement our counterterrorism policy, both in the domestic arena and in the foreign policy arena, as evidenced in our overt support of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, Libya, Algeria, and Syria. Fast forward to August 30, 2011, when the Tablighi Jamaat court case that I worked on was approved by the Chief Counsel of Department of Homeland Security. And this is an icon of the Tablighi Jamaat movement, one of the largest in the world. Outside of the United States, it's called the Army of Darkness. I began a TDY assignment, meaning temporary duty, at the National Targeting Center in November of 2011. Within 6 months, we had instituted 1,200 law enforcement actions on the case that we had started. But in September of 2012, what I call the second Great Purge, when the administration removed 67 linking records out of that case that had direct ties both to the San Bernardino Mosque, Dar Ulum al-Islamiyah San Bernardino, and the Islamic Center of Fort Pierce down in Florida. In other words, the network that we had worked on at NTC is tied directly to the terrorist attacks that we've seen recently. At the end of my career, I was relieved of my service weapon. All access to text was cut off and suspended. My secret clearance was revoked, and I was sequestered for 11 months while the results of 3 simultaneous investigations from 3 different branches of the government were concluded. In July of 31 of last year, I retired honorably. In conclusion, the threat of Islamic terrorism does not just come from a network of armed organizations such as Hamas and ISIS who are operating over there somewhere in the Middle East. In fact, branches of the same global network have been established here in America, and they are operating in plain sight, especially among those of us who have been charged with the duty of protecting our country from threats both foreign and domestic. The goal, meaning the strategy of the global Islamic movement, is based on Quran 2:191 through 193, and is actually quite simple: to establish Sharia law everywhere in the world, including here in America. And there is an organization in the United States that's actively doing that. It's called the Assembly of Muslim Jurists of America. Very benign-sounding name, but in Arabic is Majama Fuqaha al-Sharia bi-Amrikiya, the group of lawyers implementing Sharia law in the United States, which is unconstitutional. The threat that we face today that continues growing despite the willful blindness of those who insist on pretending otherwise are not the tactical methods of violent extremism, terrorism, or even operative verbs such as jihad, but rather the historical and universally recognized Islamic strategic goal of implementing Sharia law everywhere in the world so that no other form of government, including the United States Constitution, is able to oppose its influence over the lives of those who must either submit to its authority, become second-class dhimmi citizens, or perish. Thank you very much for your attention.